So like Dr. Singh said, my name is Vicky. I am one of Dr. Singh's students most of the classes here, so y'all know who I am. So thank you so much for coming. We're going to start with introductions. So we'll start at the end of the table and then work our way here, just to surprise, a little bit different. So your name, where you're from, where you live, and also the type of work that you do, and a few words on how you would describe your strengths of being autistic.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here, as well as my friends. It is a real pleasure for us to be with you all today. My name is Laura Coleman, and I currently work as a clinical research coordinator for the SPARK study at Marcus Autism Center. I'm an Atlanta native, and I got my undergraduate degree from Emory. In terms of my strengths, that's something that it's hard for me to answer myself just because it feels kind of like a humble brag. It just, I don't know, it feels weird talking about it. But I guess if I were to say what I would consider my strengths, I have a very strong attention to detail, provided that I have something that fully sustains my interest. I'm able to hyper-focus on that for hours at a time. I have a very strong curiosity about gaining knowledge and retaining that knowledge, especially in the things that most interest me. And I would say that I have a lot of strength as a writer, that I've really developed that skill since I was a child. So that's me.
Hello, I'm Erin, born and raised in Georgia. I work as a counselor at Gaia Therapy Services, and I specifically work with neurodivergent and LGBT youth. And that brings me to my strength of having that perspective of it can make such a difference to work with someone and to be able to share with someone when they've seen things from your perspective. Also, just talking about in more general, a lot of the rules of society and those expectations, I kind of got to learn by rote and learn what was going on behind it to be able to understand it, because I didn't have that innate understanding of what every facial expression and every gesture meant. I'm able to come at it from an outside perspective and really get deeper into it in some ways. I also work on the Peak Community Board that has made a website called Georgia Autism Hub, that is about bringing lots of resources together, explaining terms in simple words for people who are just starting to figure out whether they or their child has an autism diagnosis. And it's really important to me.
You be my therapist. I'm just kidding. Okay. Hey, y'all. My name is Kayla Maria Rodriguez. I'm 28 years old, so I'm a millennial. I'm mostly all Gen Z, but I like to say I'm a millennial, just FYI. I am from Mount Vernon, New York, and I currently live in Beaufort, Georgia. That's kind of why I was late. But I mean, I wasn't on time, but not, right, really. So the type of work I do, I am, right now I'm a board member. I'm training to be on the board of directors for the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, which I really recommend. That is an amazing organization. I love them so much, and they're also a great hub for things. I've written a few blogs on there, and I've done other stuff. I am representing myself, just to be clear, but I just want to say that I'm part of that network. I'm also part of a couple other things, I don't know if I should go full into detail on all of that. If you guys don't want to hear it, I don't want to brag. Humble brag, like Laura said. So the strengths of being autistic for me, like Laura, I really am good at writing. I mean, I don't know how to edit, so my stuff is really, really long. But I like writing. It's just, I haven't done a lot lately, but I think what most important is that my advocacy. I think being autistic really helps. Like how people used to say, oh, autism's just for white boys, or you know what I mean, geniuses or whatever. People still think that autistic people aren't empathetic. But actually a lot of us are. And that's what I think autism, one of the best things autism has brought me is that I have a lot of empathy. And yes, I do see the world in black and white, which I think, it's not to be that way all the time, but sometimes maybe it's a good thing because I could tell what's wrong and what's right better, and I don't make excuses for certain types of bad behavior. So that's what I think. Yeah. Oh, what else?
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. My name is Aaron Denberg Niederhofer. If you're having pronouncing it, think Niederhofer. So I was born in Miami, Florida, raised in Atlanta, Georgia. But if you think I sound with a New York accent, I promise you it's entirely genetic. So the work I do is several-fold, actually. My day job, I serve small business owners and financial professionals as a social media lead generation specialist and research analyst. For autism community, what I do is I am a board member of the Atlanta Autism Consortium, which is basically a collective of people involved in the special needs community from Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Emory, and other collective interests. I serve alongside Aaron on the PEAK group, and I also work with the Neurodiversity Task Force. Finally, when any of the organizations need me, I like to join in and go around networking with different organizations to try to find people who I can then connect with other interest groups to bring the community together. So I like to do a variety of things to benefit a variety of people. Now, if I was to provide a few words on how I would describe my strengths of being autistic, I am always open to feedback from others. It used to be one of my greatest weaknesses, but after being open to change, I am able to adapt my position on things or change my approach to things based on new information and, more importantly, feedback from others. Another strength that I have is I always have to learn the why. How many of you have asked for an explanation of a why or how, and someone said, figure it out, or you know what you did, or you know? And it's like, my dude, I just want you to explain to me this situation so I can do better. For me, it's become an obsession of learning the whys and hows so I can figure out other people's perspectives, figure out what to do in different situations. And it helps me in making arrangements, networking, advocacy, because I seek to find a way for all sides to benefit. And that allows for us to get more work done than allowing uncompromisable situations. But if I was to describe my biggest strength, it's my obsession with building things. I like to contribute in one way or another to lift something up. A fandom. I'm sure you all have your little fandoms here and there. Have you ever tried making a blog or helping someone build a video or helping someone with coming up with an art piece or fan fiction? You contributed to that friend. You helped build something. Networking is building. You are finding other people in this room and you bring them together. Here, you are networking. You are building your knowledge. You are building experience by connecting with the people here, and thus a relationship is being built. Or it can be building an organization. I like to help other people on the spectrum with building social gatherings. Let's say one of my friends wants to host a birthday party. I help them build the events. But the ability to create is something, when many people say, what do you want as a power? I already have it. If power is the ability to accomplish something, then I have the power to create things for others. And I am so glad that I can do it for so many other people.
Okay. Alrighty, yeah. Really, it's really cool to hear these different perspectives, especially on something that in our general society so stigmatized as like, oh, it's just a bad thing, or was leaving people as social rejects. So it's like really cool to hear all these like different perspectives from people who live their lives like this. And we'll go in that order again of when did you first learn about your autism or your autism diagnosis, and how does that relate to your identities? And that's a
Yeah, how to distill that all into 3 minutes. So I always knew I was different in a way that I wasn't able to describe. It was always perceived. Like I even have some of my earliest memories going back to pre-K and just how much I struggled to be included and accepted by my peers. There's just something off about me. And no matter how much I would try to fit in, I just was always on the periphery, and it didn't make sense to me. So I also struggled profoundly with my mental health starting when I was 15. And I had a family history on my mom's side of bipolar disorder, including my grandmother had been institutionalized, and my mother, I came to find later, also had the bipolar diagnosis. So that was kind of my legacy going into it. But there was also a social component, and I also always knew my dad was very odd. He's a boomer, and he just would have these very strong interests, and mostly kept to himself in the basement, working on his model airplanes, watching Star Trek. You know, kind of sounds familiar, right? But I didn't really know that was associated with autism, because this was like in the mid-aughts. So I had a couple fall semesters I had to take about a leave of absence because of severe depression, and a couple of those necessitated psychiatric hospitalization. It was during one of those off semesters I was back at home trying to recover, trying to get back into my studies, that my psychiatrist said that, have you ever thought that you might be on the autism spectrum? I think you might actually benefit from going to the Neuro Autism Center. So that was the fall of 2008 that I started going for the first time. And that was the beginning of what has been a lifelong journey of understanding what it means for me to be autistic, what it means for other people to be autistic, and just kind of, better understand myself, and gradually coming to the understanding that even though I'm never going to be quote unquote normal per se, I'm not less than other people, and I'm not better than other people, despite, people that worship Elon Musk would like to say. I'm just, a person like anybody else. It's just, I have a different wiring to me, and I think that's a really great, beautiful thing.
So I was pretty typically presenting as a kid. I wasn't interested in others. I'd much rather be staring at bugs in the ground. I sat funny and I stimmed constantly. So I do not know a time or remember a time when I wasn't diagnosed as autistic. I was lucky enough to have teachers and parents who are really supportive and got me diagnosed and got me help really early on. I saw a therapist, an occupational therapist, a short stint of ABA, and I got a lot of the skills and things to learn how to kind of make my way through society. And then since then, I've been kind of on a journey of finding out, figuring out how to mask and make my way through social society, and then figuring out how to be myself and how to, make sure that I was comfortable as well. I definitely had a lot of struggle early on of learning, here is how to make other people comfortable, even if it makes you uncomfortable, and kind of unlearning that and finding safe spaces to talk about how and why I would do things a little differently. I know in high school, I found online communities of people with autism for the first time, and it was amazing to learn that there were words for all of the things I was feeling. It was burnout, it was sensory overstimulation, it was stimming, it was suddenly having this huge vocabulary to talk and think about myself and understand myself in ways that I hadn't before. And then after that, I was able to find loved ones who loved both the mask and what was under it, and being able to explore how I felt and what I really wanted has been an interesting journey for me. And I'm sure it's not over. There's going to be cycles and there's going to be times and spaces where I do have to mask and I do have to present a certain way to be respected. But I think that it's also important to recognize when I am deciding to do that and making that an active decision.
Okay, so for me, like, I always knew kind of something. Well, yeah, well, that I was autistic at least. Well, at least I was different. I was actually, when I was in New York, you know, I was actually diagnosed with PDD when I was 2.5 years old. So like in 99.
And could you, could you explain what that is?
It used to be, it's pervasive developmental disorder, but it's not used in the DSM anymore. We don't diagnose that. We also don't diagnose Asperger's, so please keep that in mind, please. So yeah, PDD and Asperger's aren't in use anymore. Now it's just like autism, you know, in the levels or whatever. So I was diagnosed with PDD in 1999 when I was 2.5 years old. I turned 3 later that year. I don't know, I just kind of knew, but I of course I didn't know it was autism at the time, but I remember when I was in elementary school, like I felt there was moments where I just felt something was off. And, you know, people just, I don't know, they treated me differently or they just, you know, they treated me differently. And this was before I moved to Florida and got bullied. And the bullying was like really bad. And you know, I also developed mental illness like in high school because, you know, I started getting to seeing psychiatrists and, you know, this whole like exclusion from other people. I really, you know, in the bullying, you know, I tried to be invisible. After I was initially bullied, I tried to be invisible as much as I can, and I heavily mask to make people like me. And, you know, that's what made me, you know, but it took me a while to accept myself. I still struggle with it. And I feel like I still do mask. Like when I was talking to like the representative's office this morning about, you know, what's going on, you know, House of Representatives, I mask. I think I have a professional type of thing. And like, part of me is like, is that me? Or is that like imposter syndrome? Am I really the person that does all these things? So it's kind of a struggle still, but I do now know that there's nothing wrong with me. You know, there's nothing wrong with being autistic or ADHD because I also have ADHD. And the point, you know, like, and the reasons I've been feeling uncomfortable all my life is not because of what autism and ADHD is, because of people excluding me and the barriers that exist for me to survive. And people don't, you know, and also people don't accept me and respect me and validate me. So it's not really me, it's y'all. I'm kidding. You know, it's society. That's what I mean. Oh, sorry.
So I was about 10. My family and I had recently moved to Georgia. My parents took me into the house's sunroom, and they told me that I had autism because they felt I was old enough now to learn. I did have different signs, lack of control over emotions, limited interests and taste to a degree, certain behavior and processing. What helped with me learning that I was autistic was that now that I had a name to the thing, now that there was a term, a concept, I could try to understand it. Before you try to work on a problem or a situation or a disability, you first have to learn more about it. You have to understand how it works. Autism isn't a disease, it's complex. A disease is much more simple. A disorder is much more complex. There's so many factors, you can't control it. You can't treat it. You can't eliminate it. But you can work with it to try to affect it in a manner that it does not stop you from living life, enjoying life, or being a part of life. I was born in 1988, so autism research has come a long way. Back when I was a child, there were the things like the autism diet, the discipline your child, the other things. So I had to go through the worst of what was considered therapy. I am very glad to see that nowadays there's a lot more progress where understanding, knowledge, and empathy. If the me of back then had access to this, I wouldn't be needing the therapy that I do right now. Erin, I love you and all, but I do not think the therapy is going to work for me. I have a different therapist in mind, but don't worry. I wish you the best of luck with those who are going to receive so much help and consider you a wonderful friend. But I will say this, knowledge. Do not try to control autism. Seek to understand it. Seek to understand its complexities. And when you learn more about the complexities of autism, then you can learn things about stepping outside your comfort zone, trying different foods. I have got to be one of the few people in my friendship circle who will eat anything that is put in front of them. I used to be so limited, but I try so many different foods now. I try so many different activities. I try so many different activities. And that was by trying to understand autism, how it works, and how to work with it. So if you can learn about something, then you can understand it, you can work with it, and you can improve the world around you and yourself. For me, autism has been a struggle. Has it been a pain? It's had its ups and downs, but I will say that it has pushed me to never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop trying new things, and never stop trying to understand how everything's around you work or what type of impact you can have around you and others. So that's what happened for me. But you can learn from this as someone not on the spectrum. What do you try to understand around you? What do you try to work with around you? What situations? Well, you'll get the idea. I have faith in you.
You know, what's interesting is that leads right into my next question. And this is open to anyone, which is that what environments or resources or people even have helped you become the person that you are today? Particularly, I think all of you have said in one way or another, with accepting autism as a part of yourself.
I mean, if we're going in random order, I'll go. I feel like the biggest thing for me and helping is finding people who are compassionate and willing to listen. Above all else, if you've got the words wrong, if you're coming at it from an angle of ignorance, it doesn't matter. If you're really there to listen and you can really be compassionate and willing to help. Like, for resources, if you ask 10 different people with autism what resources they need, you're going to get 10 fully different answers. We all have very different neurocomplexities going on, and there will be things that rhyme where, like, a lot of people need sensory light spaces or they need things to be told to them directly. But what really works the best is when you can communicate with the people around you to get what you actually need and individualize those resources. Being able to communicate is a big part of my job, both as the therapist and an activist. And it's really important to be able to advocate for yourself of, like, the biggest skill an autistic person can have and the biggest boon that someone else can give them is letting them advocate for what they actually need, allowing them to speak and you to listen and to move from there to see what they need, whether it's, you know, having headphones on so the noise doesn't get too much, or having fidget toys so that way it's something to do with your hands. All of those little things can really make a difference.
Can I go next? Yeah. Well, one big environment for me has helped me, like, to be my true self. Mostly the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network I mentioned earlier, because they have such a great understanding of autism, especially with autistic women and autistic non-binary people. And I never felt so much so validated and so heard and so welcomed to anything and accepted and respected in my life. Even though it's all a virtual thing, we are going to meet in person for the first time in June, hopefully. Just being around them and doing stuff together with them, it makes me feel really great about myself. I mean, I still have to keep it professional, of course, but you know, and they're also a great resource. They've helped me teach a lot about myself. I still don't, even after knowing I've been diagnosed, I'm autistic all my life, I still don't know a lot about autism. There's still so many things I need to learn about. AW1 helped me with that. And, you know, the one other thing is like being around other autistic and disabled people. That's really been helpful, you know, because they understand, you know, some of the struggle, some of the challenges, well, some of the differences that can be challenging, and just the challenges of living in society. And I also had to figure out, because, you know, like you said, like autistic, if you know, the saying we like to say, if there's one autistic person, you met one autistic person. So when I said, you know, I'm trying, you know, I've had to try to find people that are more in my, like, it's kind of, you know, like on a different part of on the spectrum, autism spectrum, that is more like me than others are. I mean, I'm not saying we're all autistic, of course, but like more people that are more my speed. So that has helped me. AW1 has helped me, and other disability organizations I'm with, because they accommodate me, they understand me, they validate me in my opinions. And so, yeah, it's hard to find real environments like that in the real world, though. But you know, that's what AW1 again has a lot of resources you should check out, and other places too. So, yeah.
I'll go next. I'll go next. So for me, people have been my boss who saw the value in me and showed me that I could be of worth to other people. I've been working my current job for nearly 11 years. My mother, often my best advocate, who helped me find friends, resources, get into college. My dog, who was always there to comfort me when I was sad, who made me realize I needed to groom as I groomed her, I learned to groom myself. I needed to learn different words in my vocabulary as a child so I could communicate with her. And my ex. Being in a relationship taught me so much about other people's feelings, other people, my own emotions, learning to communicate, and learning to try different interests. So those people, all of them, every single one, including my first real friend in college, who's got me to step out of my comfort zone, start hitting the gym, and start trying different foods for the first time in my life. All these people played such a huge role in changing me, but it was because I connected with them, because I wanted to be a part of their lives. I wanted to make them happy. Because I could connect with them to that degree, I was able to change myself in order to be a part of it. As for resources, I used to run the Autism Self-Advocacy Atlanta organization. We still have a YouTube channel that Jennifer will be able to provide you guys, containing resources on women and people of color on the spectrum, and other panels in which we provide resources and guidance for those seeking assistance. It's free. You can use it as you please. But for environments, it's being gym. A gym helps with stimming. It helps with providing focus, providing development. Autism advocacy helps you feel value, helps you be needed, helps you be a part of a community, to be with those you can identify with. Having friends. There's no way you're going to go in life without friends. We are social creatures. We need to be a part of the other communities. but also the job. For an autistic, we want to be needed. We want to be a part of society. And having a job, no matter the skill level, is how we can give back to a society that is willing to work with us. I think one of the biggest resources is if someone's willing to explain something to you, a how or a why. We are so grateful to those people because they are willing to take the time to help us learn and grow. And for those people, we do so much. So give us a complex environment, but make it slow and steady. And gradually, we will either become a friend, a resource, or so many things. But we want to belong. We want to be needed. We want to be a part of your lives. We just need the chance to know what and how.
Absolutely. Laura, do you have any comments about that question?
Yeah. Where to start is actually what I'm asking myself, but so I would say the environments, resources, and people that have been just essential for me to be able to be who I am today. I haven't really gone into detail about my past, but it was very difficult for me to survive because it took me 10 years to get my degree from Emory. And during that time, I had multiple hospitalizations, suicide attempts, and my mom eventually passed away from suicide in 2014. So there were quite a few times that had it not been for certain people in my life, I do not think I would have survived. I will say that therapy was life-saving. Having a safe person to talk to, like my therapist I saw for 15 years, from 2007, she retired in 2022, and she was there at my mom's funeral. Of course, she couldn't say anything directly to me to protect confidentiality, but when they were putting my mom in the hearse to take to the cemetery, and I was about to just break, I turned around and she hugged me. So having somebody who loved me, I think just having at least one person in your life who loves you, because I think probably my fellow panelists can relate to the sense of self-loathing, of just hating who you are. I think that was the hardest thing for me to overcome. And it's taken a lot of years and a lot of what I'd call reparative relationships for me to overcome that hatred I had for myself. And there's still times that I feel like I don't measure up. I felt like that all my life. But in terms of what got me through undergrad, Office of Disability Services was amazing. My professors at Emory, they are also people I would not have survived had I not met them, 5 in particular. And I've been writing for many years, everything that happened. And if I ever publish it, like there will definitely be the acknowledgements as well as many other people. But it truly did take a village to get me to where I am. In terms of the workplace, I think having people who saw me who I was and realized that there were a lot of things I could do, because it was a real struggle when I first started. And I think people have a certain preconceived notion of what being autistic is. And a lot of people that understand me, and those are actually outside of everything that happened with my mom. Those are some of the darkest times in my life as well. But having at least a few people who actually put in the effort to try to connect with me, to understand that I was doing my best. And there was one friend of mine who said something that I thought was very profound, and I think it's very true. She said, our expectations of others color our perceptions. So having this assumption that I wasn't going to be able to do this, or that this is going to cause Laura to melt down, like that kind of made it happen, because they already expected me to fail. So having people not believe in you, even if they're not saying it directly, you kind of get the sense that that's how you're being perceived, even if you can't. I couldn't describe why I felt that way, why I was perceiving that. It's just something that was very intensely felt. And like, there's a lot of things that I've been through that I didn't have the words to describe what I was going through at the time. And that's part of why I struggle so much with my emotions and depression and wanting to end my life, is because I didn't have the words, but I felt it. But my life is beyond what I could have ever dreamed of being. And I've had so many opportunities. One that Aaron mentioned is the Neurodiversity Task Force, which has been such a pleasure to have both him and this Aaron on our task force. It's something that I talked about with one of my supervisors years ago, and just seeing it come to fruition and seeing the work that we do and just the potential to do so much more. It's really meaningful work. But yeah, I think those are the things that have been the most important for environments, resources, and people. And just having people see me for who I am, accept me, and not judge me and assume that I'm going to fail.
Yeah. Thank you. That was amazing and
inspiring.
Yeah. No, and really an example of how communities can come together to uplift everyone, and how uplifting everyone, like even the people who are struggling the most, helps the whole community as a whole. Yeah.
Laura, thank you so much for telling this story.
Yeah.
I know it took a lot to just be able to say it, but you're strong.
Right back at you.
Laura.
Right back at you. Yeah.
MVP.
That's, yeah. And thank you for everyone for saying everything, because that's a pretty vulnerable aspect of who you are. So I just want to reiterate that. I think a couple of you have touched on this already, especially with the workplace. But what are some misconceptions about autism that have affected you the most, or that really, really grind your gears? And what is something that you want people to know when entering into relationships, friendships, a workplace setting with autistic people?
If I may.
Go ahead.
So I'll start because I've been in a relationship. For me, a relationship is not a power dynamic. It's a give and take. It's a compromise. And what I've learned in being in a relationship is both sides have interests that matter. Both sides must try to find a compromise for their respective interests and maybe stepping outside their comfort zone, but also learning to validate the other's feelings. Be attentive of your other partner's needs, whether or not you're the person addressing them or not, but learn to pay attention to what's going on in your partner's life. And definitely, at the very least, both of you should learn to be able to cook. Because believe me, one of you is going to end up tired and sick, and you will need the other to be your lifesaver.
I think that's pretty solid advice just generally for relationships. Yeah.
But also, when it comes to stepping outside of the comfort zone, try to do something outside of the house or workplace with your significant other. Go to the Coca-Cola factory. Go to the fair. Go see a tournament. Okay, so for the workforce, you've all heard the non-spoken rules, the ones that aren't written down. What are they? You're supposed to get them, and you know what you did. You know what you're supposed to do. No, I don't. Would you care to explain it to me? No, you're supposed to know that. So for an autistic, it's really hard for us because no, we don't. Everyone expects us to know. I'm expected to know how to balance a budget without, even though I was never taught that in school. I'm expected to know how to do my taxes. I'm expected to do this or that when neither my parents nor the school will teach us this. So how are we supposed to enter the workforce knowing certain things? So having your supervisor be a little bit accommodating, just have them invest a little bit of time in you explaining the dynamics of the workplace, explaining the dynamics of the rules. Help them understand that involve me and I learn. Just teach me what I need to do and what I need to stay away from. I'll be an asset and I won't be a hindrance. And that's some of the stuff. Finally, I will say this. Shouting at or being physically or verbally aggressive towards an autistic does not help us with anything. My father thought he could beat autism out of me. Instead, it just delayed the growth. So trying to use aggression or shouting, it doesn't work for employees in the workforce. It won't work for an autistic either. Showing them that you want them to grow by being supportive, saying, listen, I know you messed up. May I suggest you try this? If you can do this, will make things better. To show them that you want them to improve, show them a little way how, and you'll grow. And I think the final misconception is it's not that we can't get things, it's that we learn a different way. You have the 5 senses. Let's say you there were to touch your earring. I assume, could you do that for me? What do you feel? Okay, so it's cold. So your brain processes it as cold. You process that information. But what about more complex things? Nonverbal cues, a behavior, the environment you're in where you're supposed to behave one way or another. That's a lot more complex processing of social and cultural information. So for us, we have to be taught those things from the ground up because we don't get them. But as long as we can be taught those things, we can be quite insightful.
Yeah. Kayla, you seem to be excited to answer this question.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
I'm okay, thanks. I appreciate it. So one misconception that is big right now, I'm sure most of you are aware, that vaccines cause autism, which is not true. Not true.
I would like to, and I'm going to pose this as a question so that it's legally defensible. Is Andrew Wakefield one of the most, has done some of the most damage?
He's probably done. Oh, sorry.
Wasn't R. Kennedy, the junior guy, wasn't he a friend of Wakefield's?
I don't know that to be sure,
but yeah, I mean, because that claim has been debunked many, many times over the years. And even if it was true, I mean, you'd rather your kid die than be autistic. But
I think
again,
the problem is people don't want truth. They want confirmation bias.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's one of the misconceptions. And you know, another misconception is, you know, that I feel like people don't take autistic people seriously and don't respect us. And okay.
No, I'm just preach. Sister. Preach.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you, bro. But yeah, we're not taken seriously. We think we're acting or being over dramatic, and what we feel is valid. And that's the same for everybody too. Whatever you feel is valid. And people think we're always wrong and we don't know what we're doing, and that's far from the truth. We might not know everything, like nobody knows everything, but it doesn't mean we don't know what matters to us. And so, yeah, just like, you know, people should take us seriously and like say like, oh, certain things work for everybody, and you know that autism is something that should be cured or prevented or treated, and you know, like there's nothing wrong with being autistic. There's nothing wrong with being any type of neurodivergency or being disabled. And it's not our faults, and and don't have a general assumption of what we can't or can't do, like what Laura said kind of earlier. That's just true with general relationships, and like people should just be like accommodating and just, I believe we should. And another thing is like we should be held accountable for the bad things we've done wrong. Like we should be given, I believe autistic people should be given more grace when we do stuff wrong, but it's still, we have accountability. We have to be like, it still is on us when we do something wrong. And I've learned that. So that's one thing with the workplace. This is something I'm going to just plug in real quick, because the section 504, which is, it lets disabled people disclose their disability to employers and they can get accommodations. That's being attacked right now. Georgia is one of the states that are filing the lawsuit to end it. So please advocate for that. Maybe just send the guy, I don't know if the state attorney general is getting calls, but send a letter. But yeah, like, there should be, hopefully that's still a thing, but they should just accept whatever accommodation that we need. I don't think like we can't do stuff. We can do stuff, maybe not everything, but we can definitely do certain things, important things. We just need the accommodations to do it. Like when I was an intern, at Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, I needed, nobody taught me how to do stuff. I mean, they were great. They're great. But I don't know. I just needed some teaching to do.
And you tried hard, didn't you?
Yes. You're right. I did. And, that's what I'm saying. Like they need to be more understanding, employers. They need to just teach us things like what you said earlier, and just don't assume that we know all the unspoken rules and all the rules in general. So yeah.
So one thing that I come up a lot with, especially in the helping profession, is that autistic people do not need to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much out there about the negatives of autism. There's Autism Speaks that wants to cure it. There's the vaccines in autism. And basically the only ways we diagnose autism is when it's going wrong. If you look at the DSM-5, the only things you see about autism are the meltdowns, are the sensory issues, are the social communications. You don't see anything about the strengths. And honestly, if I had the ability to cure my autism right now or give my 4-year-old self a pill that would make it better, I wouldn't. There is a lot to being autistic that I actively enjoy. There are times when I love being autistic and different and thinking in these new ways. And like, there are definitely times when it's hard and life can be a struggle, but I feel like everyone goes through different struggles and we need that diversity. We need everyone to have different approaches. And like, there are ways that I can make it easier. Like I made an active choice to look a little bit more autistic by wearing headphones today because all of the people and all of the noise can get overwhelming. And I'm probably gonna go home and sit in a dark room for a little bit to cool off after this.
With the fan on?
With the fan on. But when I'm in that dark room, I'll also get to experience every fiber of my blankets and cuddling into them and be able to listen to music and hear every note and feel such deep emotion about it and really connect and think about things in ways that other people might not. And I think also the idea of curing autism is so wild to me because no one is not autistic. There is no one in this room that has 0 autistic traits. We all have something, whether it's a sensory thing, a social thing, an emotional thing, that makes us a little bit different than the neurotypical. I think that neurotypical is this idea that, oh, most people are neurotypical, but in reality, that is like the exact mean point of everyone combined, and very, very few people are exactly right in that middle spot. And I think that we have to think about things on this spectrum, instead of this black and white idea, to really get to know people and to meet them on an individual level. But I think that so many people are so scared of autism. And I have parents who come into my sessions who are terrified when their child gets that diagnosis. And like, it makes sense in the world we live in that there are difficulties, but most of those difficulties have a solution if we can just find caring people. If you're allowed to wear the headphones, if you're allowed to bring the STEM toys, if you have someone who can be compassionate when you don't get it the first try, there are so many benefits to being neurodiverse that I really wouldn't trade for anything.
Yes, definitely. Definitely second all that. So like while y'all were speaking, it kind of got my mind going because y'all made some excellent points about myths and debunking the myths, and we could honestly do like another session entirely on that. And just a quick aside about Wakefield, he lost his medical license in the UK, and guess what he did? He went to Texas. Practice as a quote unquote doctor. But if you want to deep dive on that, there's plenty of podcasts, there's plenty of information, but all I'll say is that whenever somebody is providing a certain hypothesis and they publish a paper, and of course, like science is always tentative, but also keep in mind, what do they stand to gain from this becoming accepted? Do they stand to gain financially or reputationally or professionally or all the above? So that's all I'll say on Wakefield. In terms of some of the misconceptions, like one of the big ones I think is eye contact. And if y'all have kind of noticed me throughout this talk, I don't really look at y'all, or sometimes I look at people that are talking, like I'm looking at my fellow panelists, but especially when I'm talking, like usually I just look in front of me or I just look at some inanimate object. And the reason I do this is not because I'm not listening. I'm very much listening and processing everything that's being said. But in order for me to speak freely as I am now, if I were to try to take in all that additional information of realizing that I'm being perceived by other people, that would make it very difficult for me to talk. So it's not that eye contact is necessarily a bad thing, and I try when I can to maintain it, but it also doesn't necessarily indicate that I don't have interest in the person speaking to me or the person speaking. It's just that I'm taking that information in a different way. In terms of autistic traits and the autism spectrum, I think a good way to visualize it, because these traits do naturally occur in the population, and you can think of all the different clusters of autistic traits, and of course we identify these currently based on behavior. There's no biomarker or specific test that will say definitively that this person is autistic. But you can think of each trait as kind of its own bell curve, and you can think of all these different bell curves of all these traits, and you fall somewhere on this bell curve, and all these occur in interdimensional space. And this is kind of like what you can think of the autistic constellation. That's another concept that's becoming more prominent and is a better way to describe the complexity of the autism spectrum instead of just a singular, bell curve, because there's just so many different autistic traits, and some people have them more strongly than others and different combinations, and that kind of accounts for all that complexity. In terms of one of the, I would say, leading theories of autism, theory of mind, this is where you get the myth that autistic people don't have empathy. And it does get kind of technical, because technically it's understood to be two different types of empathy, primarily affective empathy and cognitive empathy. And affective empathy, feeling for other people, especially when someone's suffering or when someone's hurting, and feeling compassion for them and wanting to help them, that is very much intact in autistic people. Unless you have an autistic person who also has psychopathic traits, but that's another discussion. But affective empathy is intact. It's cognitive empathy, specifically understanding what another person likely is thinking. Because if you were to ask me write something, I will write it. If you ask me to read a book and understand what the meaning is, I can do that. If you ask me to look at this person, it can be someone I know, and ask me, what's this person thinking, or what do you think this person is likely thinking? I have no idea. I have honestly no idea what other people might be thinking about me, how they might perceive me. And I used to always assume the worst. I think that's part of the reason that I was so depressed and hated myself, is that I always thought I was being perceived in the worst possible way. But I'm never going to know for sure. So what I've trained myself to do instead is reason myself through it. And that most people that I encounter, unless I have a reason, like a specific reason not to like that person, I like people. Like anyone I encounter, like people are great. So why do I have any reason to think that anybody would feel differently when they encounter me? So, you know, unless I have like an obvious, you know, evidence to the contrary, I just presume that people like me well enough to not worry about it. So that's how I would describe theory of the mind. But I think people kind of misperceive what that actually means. So it just means that I don't really have a window to know people's thoughts. But yeah, I also have an anecdote related to that, but I'll share that if there's enough time for that.
Awesome. So we're on our final question before we open up to our lovely guests. You guys have touched a lot of this already. But specifically, what are some specific skills that you have learned to be successful? I mean, we all see the fidget toys. I love a fidget toy. I think it's great.
So, well, the fidget toy can be replaced with different toys, but find.
I need to talk to Jennifer about that. Okay. It's about my sister.
Okay. So basically, a way to help with stimming, just have one hand occupied holding an object. It can be a ball, a pen, any tool that will not draw negative attention. Now, Laura touched on something very important. We can't understand what the other person is thinking. When you're in a relationship, people will say, you're supposed to know this or that. You can't. But what you can do is get to know other people and try to understand what their interests are, what they want, how what you do impacts them, or how what they do impacts you. That can carry over a lot, not just in relationships, but also in work, in advocacy, and in volunteering. Trying to see something from multiple perspectives, from your perspective, from the perspectives of those you've been around, or those you're working with. I have worked with Google, Microsoft, and even McDonald's on tech-related matters, and I don't have a tech or IT degree. But I did have, after working with different people, being around different people, and learning from and about different people, the ability to see different perspectives, how those perspectives impacted others, how to work with those perspectives based on rules, norms, and what was acceptable. And in doing so, I could help Microsoft with a test-taking tool. I could help McDonald's with its kiosks and figuring out the customers. I could aid Google on some of their conferencing tools or some of their software. But the important part is, even if you don't have the greatest math skills, you don't have to be a mathematician to understand people. People are more complicated than a mathematical formula. So if someone says, I have built the formula for relationships, don't take them seriously. If someone says, I want to understand what people work, and here's what I've noticed about different people, and here's different things, ask them to share a bit of their thoughts. The point is, learning about people can carry over into technical skills, carry into analytics, carry into so many other things. And it will teach you about yourself too. I have grown by learning from different people. I would say that Erin and Laura and Kayla have all helped me grow more, because by trying to learn about them, by trying to understand them, I understood myself and I changed myself. You are not the same person who you were a year ago. Just by meeting someone, for good or for bad, you are changed by your experiences. Now, how would you change yourself for those situations where you're required to? One way or the other, we are a product of our environment as much as we are a product of our genetics. So what changes will you go through now that you've attended this meeting?
Already,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I spoke earlier about communication being one of the most important skills to learn, but I think I'd like to talk more about how advocating can look and how different it can be across different settings. Like There's the typical one that we all learn about for advocating at schools. We're like, I need the extra test room, or I need these notes written out this way, and that kind of thing. And that's a great first step, but it goes so much more beyond that. We're like, I advocate in my friend groups all the time. If someone's using, you know, language that upsets me, I tell them. Or we have things where like, yeah, if you are over sensoried by things, you can go leave the room. No one's going to be mad at you. We're not going to judge people for differences. If I have a bucket of fidget toys on my living room table for anyone to come play with, like all these little moments and all these little engagements can make a difference. And this gets even more pronounced with like my partner, where we have our own whole little language that we've made up just to accommodate each other, because we're both autistic and have all sorts of things. From like, if we want to be very serious with each other while playing a game, we'll put a hand over our head and say, did you actually mean that, or did you mean this? And it suddenly works, and you don't have to follow these strict rules of society and how engagement works if it's not working for you. It's about finding what is useful and getting others to help you make it more useful. And that can go as wide a scale as like, you know, how is your workplace doing? How is your local community doing with being able to care and accept about others? And like, that can be as simple as changing language, which happens so fast and all the time that no one will ever be up on everything. But as long as you're making that effort, because like we've talked about like levels of autism here, which is one of the older, and how the DSM-5 is currently describing autism. But nowadays, a lot of people are moving to language about like high need for high accommodation needs and low accommodation needs. So it's about like what's going on right now. What are we changing? What do we need to do? Or even like I've heard people talking about like moving. There was some genderedness in autism where women are getting diagnosed way later, and people are saying, oh, female presenting autism, which has all sorts of difficulties, and moving that language into high conformity and low conformity autism, where it gets caught a lot sooner if you stop conforming to the rules, and women are taught to conform a lot earlier and are reacted to a lot stricter if there are difficulties. And like, I could talk about language forever, but I think that making that active effort to find the ways that everyone can feel comfortable and feel seen and feel heard makes such a difference in a life.
Also, congratulations on the creation of a new language.
We're all doing it.
Yeah. So to expand upon like all the wonderful things that the errands, if I can speak of y'all in plural, I just shared, skills that I think have helped me to be successful. I'd say a big one is skills I've learned in therapy in terms of accepting myself, because it's very hard, I've realized, to have stable friendships, have stable relationships when you, or at least I, did not have confidence in myself, and I really did not like being who I was. So I think learning over time to love myself, I think that was probably one of the biggest ones that has helped me be where I am today. And for autistic people that I've met who are younger than me but are going through some similar things, just, you know, being there for them, making sure they know that there's no set path, there's no defined path. It's just the path that you take, and to not allow your brain to do those social comparisons. And like, there's that natural tendency to compare yourself to others. And like, I think when I learned that I was autistic, it helped me kind of let go of comparing myself to my non-autistic peers so much. But I think the thing that became difficult for me was, as I encountered so many other different autistic people, some of whom were very well accomplished, and then I'd say, okay, well, you know, I start feeling bad about myself for that. But again, like, it's not ever being fair to yourself, because nobody starts from the exact same starting point, and we all have like different backgrounds, different families, different resources, different like genetic makeup, like all these different things, all these innumerable factors. And it's just never fair to compare yourself to someone else and to say that you're less than other people because they were able to do this, so why weren't you? So I think letting go of those just impossible expectations I had for myself helped me actually in the end be successful. And I think learning to really lean into my strengths and to find ways and supports that help me compensate for the ways that I'm not as strong, or especially when you're on a team, finding ways for myself to do or be responsible for tasks that really align with the things I'm really good at. And the great thing about teams is that there's so many different people who have their own different skill sets. And, you know, for the things that I'm not as good at, the other team member, like they're willing to do that part because it's something that they're really good at, and kind of figuring out how you complement each other. So I think that's a really great way to be successful in the workplace, is figuring out how to align your strengths in a way that complements the work of others and you know, sets yourself up for success. In terms of advocacy, I think just always being a friend to other autistic people, always learning from them, because there's so much I don't know. The only autistic experience I have insider knowledge is my own. And I realized that like there's just so much variation across the autism spectrum, which I think is such an incredible thing. I think just building my ability to communicate, because I've always been really strong at communicating through my writing, because the great thing about writing is that you have time to really think through what you say. You have time to polish it. One of the bits of wisdom that was imparted to me early on is that there is no good writing, there's good rewriting. But usually your first draft is going to be crap, and like that's okay. But usually you can polish it and make it something beautiful if you're just willing to put in that time. And I think that's where that ability to hyper focus and perseverate on getting it absolutely perfect comes in handy, because most people I've come to find they don't have the patience for that. So if you really want to make your writing glow, it just takes a lot of time and persistence to get perfected. So yeah, I would say that those are probably some skills that have really helped me in becoming successful.
Yeah, great.
We have 5 minutes left, and I would love for any students to ask a question. You can respond to the question.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick. The most important skill I had to learn was networking and trying to find resources, because there are good resources out there. Well, some of them are bad, but a little bit are good.
There's some on the back here.
Okay, great. Thank you. But it's just really hard to find stuff. And I think they do that on purpose, so not a lot of people would take advantage of them. So that's something I had to learn, learning and networking and learning to cooperate with people who I don't agree with on everything. Like the representative I called this morning, you know, obviously I don't believe, you know, that's not the same political belief as him, but I just said, look, you know, I have to just advocate anyway and not try to insult them and all that stuff, even though I would like to sometimes. But yeah, that's really, that's what's helped me, and just asking, standing up for myself for accommodations. And that's really helpful. I think I just did want to say a couple of quick things. First of all, Autistic Lives Matter. We deserve to be here. And Black Autistic Lives Matters, Black Disabled Lives Matter, and just Disabled Lives Matter in general. So it's where our lives are worth living, but it's, you know, it's everybody, general society, everybody else that's making it hard for us. So, and, you know, disabled people have been fighting our whole lives for the rights we need, and we can't do it alone. So just please help us fight. Please do your part. You know, we can only make change if we all work together. And the last thing I'll say, hopefully I'm struggling with my mental health. I still hate myself and everything. So, and I can't get over I can't move forward from my trauma, but hopefully one day I will. So just wish me luck. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Second all those things. Like Dr. Singh said, we have a couple minutes for questions. Yes, so if you want to go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in interacting with autistic people, especially autistic children, is there any behaviors that you see like repeated across like through their parents, like mistakes that their parents would make?
So this seems like an Aaron question.
Yep. There is definitely a genetic component to autism. You see it through families. You often see different variations of it. You often see that the past generation didn't get diagnosed and were often told to mask very heavily and never got the opportunity to explore those feelings and emotions. But it is almost always that when working with a kid and meeting the parents, I will see some echoes of that activity. One of my favorite things to say is, when you come out as gay, it's a big thing, but when you come out as autistic, you get to tell your parents they're also autistic, which is fun. But I think that like autism looked different in the past because we treated it different, and honestly, we treated it worse. There was a lot more expectation of control and expectation of conformity, and those who couldn't aren't always around anymore. But I do think that it's important to remember that this is something that has always been here. This is something that's going to continue to be here, and that you need, where you can, finding that community and family is important.
I just want to add, my dad might be autistic. I kind of see that, honestly. And I second Aaron's point that I like the infinity symbol for autistic people instead of the puzzle piece, because autistic people aren't missing anything, and autistic people have been here and are here and will always be here. And we don't have to be fixed or try to, act more neurotypical. So, yeah.
Yep. Second that.
I think Laura wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add to talking about the parents. As Aaron said, there is a very strong genetic component, and part of what makes my work so meaningful is getting to work on the larger study that's trying to understand that. What we're finding is that a lot of these different traits, they tend to be these small changes, copy number variations, and specifically single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs. But these like naturally occur in the families. So there might be specific traits that a family member might have, but they don't have like all the traits that would be necessary for them to be diagnosed as autistic. So yeah, a lot of the complexity we're finding is genetic, but again, there's a big environmental component, and then how that environment interacts with the genetics. It's just, it's so fascinating, and there's so much work being done. We're just at the very beginning of it. But yes, you often find some of the traits in the parents, even if they have no diagnosis of autism, you'll often find like different traits in different family members.
So that is unfortunately the end of our time.
We don't have room for any more questions.
We can definitely take more questions, but I know if students have to go,
Yeah.
You are more than.
There are people that have like 5 p.m. classes.
Yeah.
And we have 15 minutes to get through. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you want to stay, if there is a question, another question, folks want to ask.
Bioengineering systems building. So KRONE.
If not, let's give everyone a great applause for